Good Thursday morning. I gotta admit, I woke up this morning thinking it was Friday, and so it was a little hard for me to find some gratitude this morning. But we're here. Let's do this. It's Thursday. Thoughts from the car. So today I want to talk about, I was thinking about this last night and this morning. I actually have been thinking about this a lot, about trust and how trusting ourselves, helps us to better trust others and what that looks like and why it matters. Okay. So it's all about trust today. And I think the first step is trusting ourselves, because self-trust is like a compass that guides us in all of our other relationships. Self-trust helps us, equips us to build healthy relationships with others, and also helps us to navigate a lot of our life challenges, because we're just not meant to do things on our own. We're not meant to human alone. And we have to be able to trust others, but we first have to trust ourselves. Trust is the cornerstone for all relationships. And we're talking intimate relationships, we're talking business relationships, familial relationships, all the relationships, just acquaintanceships, I'm not sure, neighborly relationships, I guess, maybe, just having relationships with others in general, any kind of relationship you can think of, is trust is essential to all of those relationships, because it builds connection and security. And in every relationship, in order for it to thrive, in order for it to be able to overcome challenges that are going to happen in every relationship at some point in our life, and just our own relationship with self, we have to be able to overcome those challenges. And we do that through trust. And when trust is broken, it's very difficult to get it back. So, and I think that starts with self-trust. There has to be stability there. And it's important in a relationship, especially the relationship with ourselves, to know that there's stability, in that relationship, and especially in our relationship with ourselves, and relationships with others, like especially like intimate partner, business relationships, professional relationships, familiar relationships. There has to be stability there in order for us to build connection and to be able to trust one another and have security. And when we have this stability and security in our relationships, and especially with ourselves, there's less stress and less anxiety, which leads to less conflict within the relationship with others and ourselves. It requires us to have open communication. We have to be open to communication with ourselves. When we are more trustworthy to others, we will receive more open communication. And when we're trusted with others, we will give more open communication to others. And this kind of trust and honest communication oftentimes is essential for actually resolving the conflicts that we're going to have. Trust means to also have cooperation. You have cooperation in relationship, cooperation with yourself, to work together with self, with all your parts. We've talked about all the different parts and loving our parts and acknowledging our different parts. And it involves cooperation with self and cooperation with others. So it's the same thing in our self relationship and our relationship with others. Again, any kind of relationship you can think of, we have to have these things. We have to have open communication, cooperation, and I think also just overall happiness. Like, having trust in relationships gives us happiness. And in order to build more trust, we also have to exude that happiness, that energetic joy. And I think positivity, honestly, is what it really is being a more positive person. And we've talked about those things just this past week, about that power of reframing negativity into positivity. And it's so important in all relationships. But in regards to trust, again, first we have to trust ourselves. So how do we do that? how maybe you're in this place where you're like, I don't trust anybody because, Brianna, I don't trust myself. I don't trust my thoughts and feelings and ideas, and I've made so many mistakes. Listen, I've been there. I am there in certain areas of my life. And one of the big things is learning to trust my intuition and how that affects my relationships. So how do we do it? How do we build trust in ourselves? I think we build trust in ourselves by recognizing and accepting and acknowledging the idea of self-discovery and accepting ourselves where we're at, wherever that is. So that means acknowledging our strengths, acknowledging our weaknesses, acknowledging the fact that we don't know everything about ourselves, and it's going to require self-discovery, that there's always things about ourselves we're never going to totally understand, and that maybe we're not even going to see or recognize until a later date, because life is a journey. To not be cliche, I don't want to be cliche, but life really is a journey, and we change and evolve and grow throughout that entire journey. We never fully arrive. And so when we're constantly discovering new things about ourselves and how we react to things and how we respond and what we really think about certain things and situations in life, and we change our minds, and that's all self-discovery. And we have to learn to trust that. We have to be able to trust ourselves in order to grow and evolve and change and become something different, become something more, or become our most favorite self by doing all of these things. And that involves trusting ourselves and understanding who we are. This creates a more positive self-image when we really start to accept ourselves for who we truly are right now, and not who we thought we were, or who we're perceived to be, or what we desire to be even. It's just who we are presently, accepting that person as they are. And so we do this by first practicing self-awareness. And we do this by things that I've mentioned many, many times: journaling. And I think a big thing is getting feedback. We have to risk to trust, even if we're not fully trusting. We have to find someone that is a safe person for us to get some feedback from. Sometimes that's like a professional person. Maybe that's a coach or a therapist or a counselor of some sort. Maybe it's our best friend. Maybe it's a partner that we have, a business partner even, maybe not an intimate partner, but maybe a business partner. So someone that we feel safe with to give us feedback, honest feedback of where we are. I remember a few years ago, I asked a mentor of mine, how she really saw me. Like, what are my weaknesses? What am I not seeing about myself? Or what do you perceive as a weakness? You know me really well. Where are my weaknesses? And that was a really, really hard question to ask. And when we met the next time, she told me those things, and it was really eye-opening, because they were things that I didn't perceive in myself. I didn't notice in myself. But then when I really thought about it, she was right. Like, these were things that I was blind to. And it's all in the delivery of how that person delivers it to you, I think, that will make a difference in actually growing from that exercise. And it was a huge growth point for me. And getting that feedback gave me so much more awareness of an area of my life that I was kind of blind in. And it's been kind of a catalyst for where I'm at today. It's been it was a wonderful resource for me. And I really appreciated it. I think the second thing is that we have to set realistic goals for ourselves. We talked about this a lot lately, about setting realistic goals and not going overly in perfection and all that kind of thing. And we've talked about it. We have to break things down in smaller steps. And then we also have to celebrate those small steps of success towards our ultimate victory and goal that we have for ourselves. And we have to learn from failure. We've talked about that a lot too. We trust ourselves more when we can overcome the failure, and we become more resilient by overcoming challenges in our life. The third thing I think is challenging negative thoughts. We talked about this yesterday, actually, about the importance of reframing negative thoughts and how it affects our lives. So very quickly, we're just going to go over the 4 things that are super important of how we do that. How we reframe things from the negative to the positive is we identify them, We replace them with something positive. We practice mindfulness, and then we repeat the affirmation over and over and over. And so that's how we challenge those negative thoughts. And when we challenge those negative thoughts, we learn to trust ourselves more because we're not constantly beating ourselves up. How can you trust someone that you beat up all the time and you think horrible things about? So we have to change and reframe and shift those negative thoughts into positive thoughts. The fourth way that we learn to trust ourselves better is by caring for ourselves. We're talking self-care again. I know. Everybody's always talking about self-care, but it really is true. How can you trust someone who doesn't take care of themselves? Now, I'm talking hygiene. I'm talking like just getting good sleep at night. Someone who is mindful about what goes in their body, like the diet that we have. I'm not talking just food. I mean, yes, I think that is very valid. Eating a healthy diet, but I'm talking about the diet of consumption of what we are consuming in the world, through media, entertainment, all of those things. Like, we cannot trust ourselves if we are feeding ourselves a diet of negativity, if we're feeding ourselves a diet of comparison, constant politics, like things that are just not healthy. Like, a healthy diet overall, we have to care for ourselves, and we don't build trust with others and even ourselves if we're not taking care of ourselves. Self-care is a real thing. And again, that's why self-care is not just, spa days. That's great. That's awesome. But actually taking care of yourself, doing the work, the inner work, that's part of self-care. We cannot trust ourselves if we are not willing to invest in ourselves in important ways, like doing inner work and doing external work, like taking actionable steps. That's why I love coaching so much, because it's about the actionable steps. It's about what we can actually do to move forward towards our goals and ideas and dreams and our purpose in life. So if we're not caring for ourselves and trusting ourselves, we can't move forward and do those things that we're called to do in this world. And I think too, being active and taking care of our body. We've talked about that, good hygiene, taking active in our bodies, not just laying in bed all day long. We're actually doing something with our life. We can't trust ourselves if we're not doing something of importance in our life. And the fifth thing is surrounding ourselves with positive people, which kind of goes back to challenging those negative thoughts. We can't challenge negative thoughts if we're we can, but it makes it a lot more difficult if we're constantly surrounded by negativity and negative people. We have to take the self-care and make sure that we're surrounding ourselves with people who are positive, people who have that joyful energy, people who have goals and dreams for their lives, people who understand that self-care is very important, and they support you in it. So we have to surround ourselves with people like that in our lives, so that we can learn to trust ourselves more. Because if we have negativity coming in our life all the time from others, how are you going to trust yourself? Because you're constantly going to be thinking negatively about yourself. And I think the last thing is, and I've kind of mentioned it already, is finding outside support. We're not meant to do this life alone. We are not meant to have everything together all the time, because we're human. So when we are humaning, we have to human well. And when we're really humaning and we're not doing so well because we're human, we need to have the support of others. And so whether that's professional support or familial support or, friend support, personal support of some sort, we have to be able to have people speaking into our lives in good, positive ways. And they help us trust ourselves, because when we share things with them that we're thinking or feeling and they're safe, that's going to reflect back to us as trust in ourselves, that, hey, maybe I am a lot better and more worthy of whatever, because, they agree with me, kind of thing. So it's that external validation. There's nothing wrong with having external validation. We just can't rely on it all the time, but it is an important part of the internal validation for ourselves, to trust ourselves. Okay, so then so let's say we're trusting ourselves, right? And now we're like, well, I want to be more trusting in my relationships with others. And how do I have a trusting relationship with other people? Sorry. I need a quick drink. So how am I more trustworthy with other people? How do I build that trust with others? And how can I be more trustworthy to others in those relationships? And foster that trustworthiness, and what every relationship needs to build trust. The first thing is honesty and transparency. Absolute number one thing that we have to do. We have to be willing to communicate openly with those that we want to build connection with. We have to avoid dishonesty of all kinds, and some dishonesty is not saying anything at all and not being willing to say the hard things. That is still being dishonest when we are not openly communicating and being transparent with our thoughts and feelings with someone. We have to be transparent with our intentions too. And I think this is super important both in professional relationships and also in our intimate relationships, is people need to know your intention. What is the intention of you trying to build this connection with this person? What is that intention? You have to let people know what you're thinking and planning. So, and we don't have to tell everybody everything, but we do need to make sure that intention is known in every relationship that we have. The second thing that builds upon the honesty and openness is keeping our promises. We have to follow through on our commitments. We have to. We talked, I think it was last week, about following through on commitments and why that really matters. We have to follow through on our commitments. We have to be a reliable person and meet our obligations. Whatever those minimal obligations are, we need to meet them. Absolute must. And yeah, we're going to mess up because we're human, right? But we have to be very intentional. And I think that one of the big ways that we mess up in all our relationships is we tend to overpromise sometimes, especially when we're excited about a relationship. Like I'm thinking like intimate relationships. We're excited about a relationship or excited about something new going on within the relationship, is we tend to overpromise because the intention is we want to love this person. We want to provide for this person. We want to give good things and do good things and build something amazing with this person. But often what happens is we end up overpromising. So we have to make sure that we are not overpromising so that we can be seen as reliable and be consistent. And keep our promises, actually keep the promises that we make to someone. And again, this is not just intimate partner, but this is also in our business relationships and professional relationships. If we can't get that work task done, then don't tell your boss that you can get it done, because then you become unreliable and you are overpromising and you're not keeping your promise. And that just doesn't build trust in that professional relationship. And I kind of mentioned this already. The third thing is consistency is absolutely key for building trust. And I feel like that's kind of like a duh moment, but we have to show up. We have to show up and we have to be dependable in our actions. We have to be predictable. Predictability is essential to consistency. And I don't mean predictability as being boring in life, and being a boring friend and things like that's not what I'm talking about, but predictability in everybody knows what to expect from you, that you are reliable, that you keep your promises, that you are a consistent person. So we know what to expect, that you are who you say you are. And that builds trust in our relationships. And that means that we have to avoid being kind of finicky and flaky. Like we can't just cancel plans at the last minute. We can't cancel and change our minds and have to shift constantly. Sometimes it's going to happen because we're human, but we can't do that constantly. We just can't. The fourth thing is having active listening. By active listening, we have to mean that we understand what someone is saying and then we are able to repeat that back to that person. So that means we have to pay attention to what someone's saying. We have to have genuine interest in what they're telling us. And if we don't, maybe we don't understand. Then we have to ask clarifying questions. If we don't understand something or we're not really genuinely interested in what they have to say, sometimes we need to ask clarifying questions, and that will actually pique our interest. And will help us to understand the person that we're trying to connect with. And that doesn't mean we all have to like the same things, but we have to show respect. When I say genuine interest, we have to show respect for that person and what they are trying to do or what they're trying to convey to us, because it's important to them if they're trying to talk to us and communicate with us. And a part of that in active listening is avoiding interrupting. We do not want to interrupt someone when they are trying to tell us something about what's going on. And that means that we respond to things rather than reacting. The fifth thing is we have to be empathetic. We have to practice empathy. That means we try to understand someone, where they're coming from, even if we haven't been in the situation. We try to understand the situation. We validate their feelings, even if we don't agree with the behavior that they have because of the feelings or emotions, or agree with that emotion about a situation. We still validate their feeling about it because they're their feelings. Feelings are not right or wrong. Feelings have no morality. They're just our feelings, but we need to be validated in our feelings. So we have to show empathy that way. And we have to offer support where we can offer support. And again, that doesn't mean that we have to agree with their actions or that we have to agree with how they're feeling about something. But we do support them in a way that shows them love and empathy, and that you want to connect with them, and that builds trust when we can show empathy. I don't know what number we're on, but we also have to respect people's boundaries. This is a huge part of building trust with someone. When we respect people's boundaries, that means that we have to recognize their boundaries. And sometimes people don't communicate and say, this is a boundary. So we have to become emotionally intelligent enough to be able to kind of see that boundary line that someone's putting in there. And if we don't know what the boundary line is, we have to trust that we can ask them, hey, is this a boundary line? And if they respond in like a negative way, then that kind of tells you what kind of relationship you're in, and the level of trust that your relationship has. It's a really good marker of when you question a boundary. And I don't mean question like, why is this boundary here? It's more of, is this a boundary that you're giving me? If we're not able to like recognize the actual boundary line. And I think it's really important for us to communicate our boundaries too. Like boundaries change, sometimes they're very stagnant and they stay there forever, but sometimes they don't. And then the last thing is we have to show vulnerability, which goes along with empathy. This builds intimacy and connection. And we have to practice forgiveness. We have to forgive when we mess up. And we don't want to be abused in that. That's where boundaries come in. I'm over on my time yet again. You guys, I got to get better at this. But my challenge for you today is really question where you are being trustworthy or not being trustworthy. And try to implement some of these things that you're maybe not doing so that you can be more trustworthy in your relationships. And maybe that starts with you trusting yourself better. All right, guys, have a great Thursday.